Okay, so do you want to go ahead, Caroline, and get started with just the Zoom specifics?
Yes, I will.
Great.
So first of all, thank you everyone for bearing with us. I think we're both admitting that this is our first time doing a Zoom webinar and we're both still learning. So hopefully everybody can hear us and see us, and most importantly also see our PowerPoint presentation. So thank you for joining us this evening for our book-based webinar on the teenage brain. So I think everybody already now has their video stopped and their any noises muted, so that way we don't get too distracted. So our plan for this evening is to go through the presentation based on the book that I have right here, The Teenage Brain, a Neuroscientist Survival Guide to Raising Adolescents and Young Adults. And then at the end, we should have plenty of time for any questions and the answers that you might have. And also, you know, as we're going through the presentation and a question pops into your mind, just feel free to put it out there in the chat, and Leah and I will do our best to look through that and answer as many of the questions as possible. So just a little bit about myself. I'm Caroline Scheiber. I'm a licensed psychologist in Boulder, and in my private practice, I specialize in treating teens, of course, and also adults with depression and anxiety disorders, disordered eating, and I also specialize in divorce and separation. I also do mental health evaluations and neurocognitive evaluations, mostly for court proceedings, such as domestic relations. And I'm going to hand it over to Leah to introduce herself also.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Leah Kaplan. I have a private practice in North Boulder, and I work primarily with teenagers, young adults. I work a lot with the college age and also individuals, mostly focused on anxiety, depression, self-image, communication, all those things. I also do parent coaching. And I also do small business consultations with something called True Colors. So a lot of different areas that I love to work in. And this is especially an area that I love and one of the greatest books. One thing that Caroline wanted you to know also is that in the chat, there is a document that has been uploaded with some book resources for you. And even though this discussion is mostly focused on this book, The Teenage Brain, there are great resources in there for you. We will save the last 30 minutes of this presentation. We'll go through the PowerPoint for about an hour and then save the last 30 minutes for question and answers. If you have any questions or any specifics that you're coming into this talk with from the beginning, please go ahead and write that in the chat now, because then we can see it as we're presenting our slides, and it makes it a little more interactive for us, and we might be able to touch on those questions as we go. So we just wanted to take a minute to have you formulate any specific questions now, and then we can take a look at that as well. Thank you.
Do you want to give them just some time to do that, or should we
just take a minute? Yeah, we'll just give them like a pause.
Okay.
The list should be on the very top. If you go to the very top of the chat, it'll have like there's a little icon that says book list for parents and a download arrow. And it says click to download. Tell me if you don't see it. Just scroll all the way to the very top. Not there. We see it on our end, so we'll have to figure that out. I'm not sure.
Let me try this. Let me try to send this one more time.
You know what? I just clicked on. Oh, wait, hang on.
So I just sent it to everyone one more time. It might have been because I sent it out when it was just you and I, Leah, and so maybe I had to send it.
Now there. Okay, great.
Okay, very good.
Yep. Okay, let me look at some of these questions really quick.
Okay.
Thanks, Nora. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Thank you, Carrie. Carrie, how old is your child? Will you just put that in the chat as well? Thank you. Okay, so if you have questions as we go along, please go ahead and add them to the chat. We'll try to toggle back and forth and see those so that we can address things as they go through the slides. Okay.
Ready?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started with our content now. Okay. So again, welcome. This talk is BPS. We're from Boulder Psychological Services, and we do community talks throughout the year. We are a group of private practitioners that really believe in community and really believe in education for the populations that we work with. This is a little bit different than some of our other talks because this is a book-based talk. So we have picked this book, The Teenage Brain, and we have a really good PowerPoint that kind of outlines the specifics of this book. And so we really encourage you to use this as a jumping point. If you want to get more information, please read this book because it is chock full of great information. So this is the content that we'll be going over today, and it just follows the flow of the book. We're going to start first talking about the brain structure and really try to give a quick hit informational piece on helping you understand what's going on in your child's brain and their restructuring. Then we'll talk about impulsivity and risk-taking, which if we have teenagers, we all know this is something that kicks up during this age range. Then we will touch on learning and sleep, stress. We will also touch on alcohol and marijuana and a little bit on nicotine and electronics and how all of these things are really issues that we need to keep a close eye on in understanding and in moderating our teens. Then we will end this presentation by really talking about the do's and don'ts and how to have those conversations with your teenager. In addition to that, we will talk about really how to stay in connection with them during this time that can be a little bit trying. So we'll go ahead and get started with chapter 1. And this is talking about entering the teenage years, the adolescent storm. This is a great way to categorize what's happening for this young, budding adolescent. There's also a great book by Dan Siegel, and it's called Brainstorm, and that title is also very accurate on what's happening. So during this time, we have in the past, before the last decade of research, attributed a lot of the changes and the mood swings and the impulsivity to hormone changes. Although hormones are being introduced to the brain, really what's going on is massive reorganization in the brain. This creates this storm of this growth, and psychologically, physiologically, and behaviorally, we see a lot of new things. So this can be a little bit trying as we are moving into this with our teen. And we've had this younger child who we could kind of give an outline to, and now our teen is showing some different behaviors. But getting the foundation of why this is so important and why we can look at this with a different perspective is really an important thing for us to remember. This time represents major growth. New connections are changing. This is called remodeling of the brain. And there's two really important things that are happening. Number one, the brain is primed for learning. The brain is also pruning away connections that it doesn't need anymore. So this is very important as these connections are growing and the neural changes are happening. The second phase of this remodeling is called, and if you guys can just turn off your video, that would be great. And the second phase of the remodeling is called myelination. And what this means is that neurons are actually getting myelinated so that the brain can talk to each other. The brain development starts from the back and moves to the front. So we have our reptilian brain and our amygdala, our limbic system, and the last to develop is going to be the prefrontal cortex. So as these synapses are growing and changing, myelination is happening. And myelination means that it's the communication highway from one section of the brain to the other section of the brain. So all this is going on in your young adolescent and your adolescent's brain. There's also a tsunami of input. So they are getting information from peers, they're getting information from teachers, they have academic pressures. Now in this generation, they have major stuff going on with social media. So there's so much input that they're trying to deal with as their brain is also pruning and myelinating. Brains are also seeing hormones for the first time. This adds to the intensity of some of the changes we're going to be seeing in the adolescents. And the sex hormones activate the limbic system, which is the emotional center of the brain. We're going to talk more about why stimulus seeking and novelty and impulsivity comes into play here, but this is also where this really starts to become significant. So I wanted to start with just acknowledging that there are very differing emotional experiences at this time. I'm also a parent. I have a 13-year-old and a 17-year-old. So I definitely navigate this all the time and really balancing my perspective as a parent and really trying to see my teenager's perspective. Parents at this point have gone from one of my favorite books called Untangled. She said, you go from being a gummy bear to a Brussels sprout. And it's a great way to kind of understand as a parent some of the loss that we can feel at this time. It feels suddenly really unfamiliar. The child can be unpredictable. They can be infuriating and sometimes unlikable. All of a sudden, we are experiencing that in them and they are experiencing that in us. We might have been the parent that they wanted to hold our hand or cuddle with us or wanted to talk and chat, and now they're withdrawing and changing. And I just want to acknowledge that as a parent, this is a really big transition for us to go through also. And we'll touch on this at the end about how it's so important to really stay regulated and to really stay in touch with yourself so that you can parent better. So a parent's perspective is, what are you thinking? How many times do you say to your teenager, what are you thinking? Or you even think that when they make what you think are the dumbest decisions or the strangest decisions, just not thinking things through. And we might say or might want to say, well, you can't do that because I said so. This may have worked in the past, but now as they are moving into this older age and they are becoming more independent, this just does not work anymore. So a teen perspective is that they are torn between childhood and adulthood. This is a really important process for them to go through, but this is also part of them pushing away from us. Again, Untangled talks about pretend like you're the swimming pool as the parent and the water is life and they want to swim in that swimming pool on their own. They may come and cling to the side when they need to and kind of touch base with you, but then they need to be able to push off the side and do it safely so they can experience life. This is also when you have the NDS, the Natural Defiance Syndrome. This is a quote from Andrew Cuomo, who I have grown very affectionately fond of. I listen to him in the morning for news reports. But anyways, he was talking about NDS because he has raised 3 children and talks about how in this age, we really see that there's this natural defiance syndrome. If we can reframe the way we're looking at that and understanding that this is an important developmental piece that's going on for them, that also helps us come from a more loving place. This is a very, very important, special time of development. Learning is blossoming. They are growing. They are primed to gain knowledge and have more innovation. This is also a time of impulsivity and mood swings and poor judgment. And it's also a time where there are some unique hazards where they are in more danger than they have been. So these confusing emotions and this need for impulsive behavior as they try to figure out who they are, we as parents really have to go along for that ride with them and do it in the best way that we can to stay in relationship with them.
So building upon what Leah already touched on, let's talk in a little bit more detail about the structure of the teenage brain. So first and foremost, we often assume because somebody looks like an adult that they also should be behaving like adults. But the truth is that neurologically, teenagers are really are not adults. And we really need to remind ourselves of that all the time. So here are some ways how their brains differ. So first of all, and Leah touched on this, is the gray matter and the white matter. So you can think of the gray matter kind of like the building blocks of the brain, and the white matter, like the myelination that Leah talked about, is what connects the different brain structures with one another to have information flow from one part of the brain to another. So the teenage brain has an overabundance of gray matter, which means it has all the building blocks, but it really has an undersupply of the white matter, meaning that their brain parts are really just simply not connected, which now, it might make sense why they're doing these things that just seems so obviously not to make sense to us, but to them, it's not as obvious. So in that regard, the teenage brain is kind of like a Ferrari, if you will. It's primed and pumped, but it has not been road tested yet. So it's all revved up, but doesn't quite know where to go yet because the brain connections are not established yet. So again, something, they might do something that just to us with a fully developed brain just seems so obvious to be a bad decision, but to them may not be quite so obvious. And this is also where you come in, and we'll talk a little bit more about practical tips as we go through this presentation, but they really need your help to understand consequences. So things that are so obvious to us, we need to repeat over and over and over to them so that they actually start establishing these connections and this like forethinking, if you will. So one of the most important brain structures to consider when speaking about teens is the frontal lobe. And that's the connectivity the connectivity of the brain, like Leah mentioned earlier, slowly moves from the back of the brain to the front of the brain. And really the last places to connect are the frontal lobes. So the back of the brain structures really are the more primitive, really host the more primitive functions, if you will. So those are the ones that we mostly share with animals. The frontal lobe, however, is really what allows us to make informed decisions, sound judgments, inhibit our impulses, and so on. So when we think of a civilized adult, really it's the frontal lobe that we're talking about. And the teen brain is only about 80% of the way up to maturity, and the 20% gap where the wiring is thinnest is in the frontal lobe. And again, because the frontal lobe is responsible for sound judgment and inhibition, it explains why teens behave in such puzzling ways. Sorry, I'm gonna have to admit somebody here. Multitasking, which we will talk about in a second. So abilities that are mostly associated with frontal lobe functioning or frontal lobe development are what's sort of called the executive functioning skills. And those again include things like sound judgment, informed decision making, impulse control, inhibition, as well as the ability to hold in your mind the intention to perform a certain task at a future time, such as calling mom when you get home safely from a party, for instance. So again, because of the lack of wiring and development, teens are not very good at these tasks. And again, as an adult, you wonder, like, why are they not calling? Again, they do it again, which seems so obvious, like such an obvious, easy solution to us, just neurologically is not as easy to them. So another important function of the frontal lobe is multitasking. So that's the ability really to switch from one task to another. And teens are bad at that, despite of what they might think. And this also explains why 87% of the 6,000 adolescents that die every year in car accidents die because of distracted driving, because they cannot switch so fast from looking at their phone to check a text to paying attention to the road. So finally, another important brain structure to talk about when speaking about the teenage brain is the limbic system, and mostly the hippocampus and the amygdala. So the hippocampus is really all about learning. And again, Leah already mentioned that learning is something that's actually supercharged and very easy for adolescents. And we'll talk about this in more detail as we go through the presentation. But that also means that it's kind of very susceptible to learning the wrong things. And again, we'll talk about this in more detail. The other part is the amygdala. So the amygdala is really involved in sexual and emotional behavior. So it's thought to be quite unbridled, and that now and over exuberant and immature, which again probably explains the explosiveness and the hysteria and all of these emotional outbursts that you don't quite understand, because you couple kind of an immature amygdala with a frontal lobe that's not quite developed nor wired well yet, which again is responsible for impulse control, and you kind of can see how the perfect storm would happen. So this is just an illustration of of the human brain, just to give you some sense of where things are. So you can see here up front you have the prefrontal cortex, the frontal lobe, which again are sort of like the higher developed, if you will, brain areas that allow us to think into the future and to plan and to organize and to control our impulses. Here you have the limbic system, which again hosts both the amygdala and the hippocampus. And then here towards the back, you have things like the cerebellum and the brainstem, and these are really the more primitive brain functions, if you will, that we often share with, or that we share with animals. They're responsible for things like helping us breathe and balance, and more like the basic survival functions.
So impulsivity and risk-taking. We kind of went over, Caroline talked about the structure of the brain and the development that's going on. I think impulsivity and risk-taking are probably, as a parent and as a therapist working with teens, probably the thing that I hear the most, probably the concerns that come into the office the most. And in understanding what's really going on and why teens are primed for this, I think that then we can approach having more effective reactions to that and more effective conversations to that. So if you understand all this brain growth that's going on and how that prefrontal cortex, the CEO of their brain is not intact yet, we understand that we can help them by creating the conversations that lead to less impulsivity and, more importantly, risk-taking that doesn't need to be life-threatening or too dangerous. So the adolescent brain is prone to crave rewards and gratification. And this is because we have a dopamine reward center that looks differently for a teen than it does for an adult. So I'll talk about that a little bit more further down. But the anticipation of reward, despite the risks, is in the heart of the adolescent impulsivity. Teens experience strong rewards due to the plasticity of their brains. They also experience stronger rewards because, again, the dopamine system is actually functioning differently in an adolescent brain than it functions in an adult brain. So due to the lack of the connection between the amygdala, which is the emotions, fear, responsiveness, and the frontal lobes, they can easily find themselves in dangerous situations because they're not able to think things through in the same way that an adult would. And they're also more driven for novelty and impulsivity because the rewards feel greater to them. This is something called hypervigilance, hyper-rational thinking, where all of a sudden you can weigh the pros and the cons just seem to fall away because the risk versus reward is different for a teenager. So their natural ability to weigh the pros and cons does not happen in the same way that it does in an adult brain. So when we're dealing with these teenagers, we can't expect for them to function the way we do as an adult. They have very skewed thinking. And if you can understand the premise of that, then your approach will be a little bit different. So the teenage amygdala will signal danger, but because it's not myelinated fully and not connecting to the prefrontal cortex, they're not able to really weigh those situations out. It is really interesting to also comment that not only is it not myelinated and connected, the amygdala and the teenage brain is actually oversensitive and overactive. So there is this double-edged sword that's happening. There's this excitability and this reactionary response that's happening. And because the dopamine reward center is actually different in the growing brain, the rewards feel stronger to them. There's some studies from functional MRIs, fMRIs, where they show, which is basically a video of the brain, and they show an adult brain versus a teenage brain. And they show the dopamine reward center of the teenage brain lights up faster and more than an adult brain when presented with something that's exciting, presented with something like winning something, or sugar, or driving fast. Anything that seems impulsive or exciting, they actually show the teenage brain is lighting up more. If we can understand that, then we can also understand why decisions that don't make sense to us all of a sudden make more sense to them. It feels better to them. They actually have less dopamine in their brain at this time. So this is a really interesting thing to see the balance of this. They have less dopamine, so they get bored more easily. It's harder for them to feel just a baseline of excitement. However, the way that dopamine is released, it releases faster and more in bursts. So they get more of a kind of a pump or a reaction when dopamine does come. So understanding that very important piece really helps us understand impulsivity and risk-taking. Caroline, if you can go to the next slide. So this impulsivity is something that we can really talk about, and we will touch on this at the end, but how do we really practically, as parents, keep our teenagers safe? What is a normal range of risk-taking? And this is something that really is very different depending on the family system. And one of the things that I think all of us therapists that work with young adults try to do, and you as parents can try to do too, is really help do a cost benefit analysis with your teenager. Help them really visualize what are some potential consequences that might come from this behavior. And not in a lecturing way, not in an angry way, but helping them create that connection. It's also executive functioning skills, helping them think through situations. The other day, I was on a call with a client whose boyfriend is a sophomore and doesn't have a license. And she was telling me on quarantine that he was stealing the car and sneaking out at night. And I was like, oh, well, that's interesting. You know, what's driving him to do that? What, you know, who is he doing it with? Where's he going? What's he getting out of it? And, you know, do you have concerns over it? And her response was so classic to me. I actually wrote it down and put it in quotes. She said, well, he does have his permit and he's a really good driver. And I just thought that was so classic, because here's this kid who's 15, who's stealing a car at night and going out with friends on quarantine. And somehow the girl, my client, who's just the girlfriend of him, finds a way, again, to have that hyper rational thinking where the risk does not come in as it should in weighing the costs and benefits. So we see social isolation really increases risky behaviors. So when you're trying to dampen that and make it more moderate for your teen, really help them find ways to socialize with friends in positive ways. Find things that they're interested in. Are they interested in guitar or art or horses or sports? Find activities that help them have peer connection that don't need to be connected with risky, high-risk behaviors. A teen also learns so much faster than adults. So this is part of where we need to, we'll talk more about later too, but where drugs and alcohol and vaping come into play, because just as their synapses are so primed for learning, they're also primed to wire for addiction and become more prone to have that smoother connection with addiction. So we really have to watch that the impulsivity does not move into a negative area. Really encourage open and curious conversations. Again, we'll touch on this at the end, but talk through scenarios without judgment. Let your teen know that you can handle it, that you're not going to freak out or be overwhelmed by the situation that they're telling you about. I think that's one of the things I hear the most is kids don't want to talk to their parents because they're worried that their parents will have too big of a reaction or that they will get punished. So if you take it out and make it more like a conversation, that's a really important practical tip for having these important connection moments with your teenager. And then it's a marathon, not a sprint. Pick your battles. If your kid wants to color his or her hair purple, that seems pretty safe. Let them take risks. Let them show their individuality where it's appropriate and safe. They will be less likely to push those boundaries if they feel like they have those freedoms. Also, going back to it's a marathon, not a sprint, is have these conversations in pieces. Teens are better at taking in information in small pieces, and Caroline will talk about that with some learning tips. But just remember, this is a process. You're going to go through this for many years with your teenager. So more often than not, hold your tongue, find out what's going on for them, get curious about what's motivating them, what other people are doing, why they're tempted by these things, and try to have that connected conversation.
Yeah, so talking a little bit about learning and what's happening for the teens neurologically. So learning depends on the synapses in the brain, and you can see I have some illustrations here. So synapses are really the tiny gap across which a neuron can send an impulse to another neuron and thereby establish connections between different brain areas. And so here you can see the neurons, you can see the synapses, and here this is the way that they connect. And so for new neural connections to be made, both sides of the synapses need to be switched on or excitable. So the teenage brain learns a lot easier than the adult brain, mostly because their synapses are kind of like switched on all the time. And so they're very hyper excitable. And also because there haven't been many brain connections made yet. So the more a piece of information is repeated and relearned, the stronger the neurons become, and the connections become kind of like a well-worn path through the woods, if you will. So that also means that they are very prone to learning potentially bad behaviors. And if they're repeating those bad behaviors over and over again, you run the risk that they are developing bad habits. So what you need to do as a parent is basically, jump ahead of that and help them learn the right things. And that also actually only works with repetition. And on the next slide, I talk a little bit more about some practical tips. Remember that if you don't use it, you'll lose it. And you may remember from may recall from your own experiences, maybe as a teenager, you knew how to play the piano or something, but then you just stopped, and now it's like you've never learned it. And that's because these neuronal connections that have been created were probably disconnected again because you haven't used it enough. So again, like I said, so even though the teen brain is at peak efficiency when it comes to learning, much else is inefficient, including attention, self-discipline, task completion, emotion regulation, and so on. So, which is why we really need to help them learn the right things. So talking about some practical tips for learning, or basically how to make use of these hyper-excitable synapses, if you will. So for one, when you want to teach them a lesson, one thing, which, did you say something? Oh, no. Did you want to say something?
No, you paused for a second, but it's fine.
Oh, I did. Oh, okay. All right. Did everybody hear what I just said? Like one thing at a time for your teen. So don't overwhelm them with too much instruction. So sorry, yeah. The other thing to know is that it's a lot easier for your teen to remember the positive things than the negative consequences. And Leah already talked about that. A lot of that has to do just with their dopamine receptors and so on. So again, that means, when they do something that obviously was not a good decision, despite the negative consequences, they may still repeat it if it felt good. And even worse, if they actually got away with it. So they're doing something that's exciting and they got away with it. They really need your help to understand that next time it may not go this way. So you really need to take your time and over repeat what potential negative consequences are. And when you do that, again, you don't want to do that in a judgmental way, but you really want to weigh the pros and cons. So you also want to see their side, even though it may make no sense what they're saying. But you do want to give them that kind of respect, and you want to take them seriously and validate their perspective in order for them to hear yours. So again, although your teen might say they can multitask and may even look like they can multitask, they really can't. So you want to encourage them to stop and think about what they need to do next and when they need to do it. And again, here they really need your help. And that's, think about things like getting homework assignments done and so on. They really need your help with planning and organizing because they just don't have the neurological structures in place yet to do that. Things like writing down instructions for them and directions can be very helpful. Again, you want to limit your instructions to 1 or 2 points because of the short attention span that they have. Help them organize by giving them calendars, suggest to write down daily schedules, and so on. And all of that, again, you really want to do in a supportive and not judgmental way. You want to set limits, because this is definitely something that the teenage brain cannot do for itself. So you kind of need to be on top of it to help your teen not even get tempted with making bad decisions. And again, the more that you treat your teen as an adult, the more likely they are to behave like one too. And so again, that means, you know, they come up with a stupid idea, you still want to validate it, and you still want to really talk about it, take it seriously, and then think things through with them. Okay, so you know, it might be exciting to go on a on a ride when you only have a parking permit, and it's stay-at-home orders are on. Well, and it is exciting, right? But then what are the potential consequences of that? So you really want to talk about both of that.
Okay, so stress. In addition, I think we have all, when we're raising a teenager, seen that reactions to stress seem different. Things are very life and death. There is an amplification. We've talked about how this brain, this young growing brain, is oversensitive, it's overactive, and it's excitable. So what happens is that stress often, when it comes into play too, we see that there is a very different reaction to it. And trying to not just think that our child is being over dramatic or a victim, or labels that would be unhelpful at this time, knowing that the frontal lobes are the regulators and filters of emotion, and that their emotional responses are not being regulated and controlled by that CEO of the brain. So while this teen brain is under construction, we are going to have these spikes, these ups, these downs, these waves. Things feel very big to a teenager. And it's really not about being dramatic. It's really about the experience that they are having in their brains, the chemicals that are being produced, and that is creating a reaction that then shows to us as behavior. So really understanding that also in crisis, it's very hard for them to sometimes slow down and think through steps of things. This is why it's also good for you as a parent to really be talking through the pros and cons of situations and to prime them for understanding those things so that they don't find themselves in a stressful situation. If they are out drinking, or if they are caught at a party and something happens, what is the next step? What is the next step? Have those conversations early with your teenager. Don't just avoid them because you think they're not doing things or because you think they're not exposed to those things, because the chances are that they are. And it's really better to have those conversations on the front end, because when they are in a stressful crisis situation, that is a really hard time for them to access that information. It's also really interesting, and this Teenage Brain book has so many practical specifics with brain development. It's very dense. So if you're interested in really understanding more about the specifics and not just the behaviors we see, they talk about a stress hormone called THP. This is a stress hormone that teenagers have. We all have it. But as adults, what happens is when it's secreted, we actually have a calming effect with this hormone. So afterwards, we will actually feel a little bit calmed and more relaxed after a crisis is over. When a teenage brain has this stress hormone that is introduced during a stressful or anxiety-ridden situation, it actually does not have the same calming effect for a teenager. And sometimes it can actually stir anxiety. So we as an adult, not only do we have life experience and our frontal lobes are connected and we have confidence in certain areas that a teenager might not have, they also do not have the advantage of having this THP stress hormone that helps us as adults cope with stressful situations. So we've got the exaggerated amygdala function, which is firing and very active. We've got less control from the prefrontal cortex. The myelination is not really smooth and it's not operating as quickly. And then we've got the stress hormone that's not really acting in the way that it will be in the future. So we've got this little on the bottom picture of all these frustrated, distracted, disorganized, frazzled, jumbled feelings that are happening in a teenager's life. And when you can really understand that there's a lot going on neurologically, it makes it a lot easier to not get annoyed that they forgot their jacket for the third time at school, or that, you know, they're so upset about a fight they got in with a friend that you're just like, you got in that same fight last week, really? So it's really helpful to understand their brain is having a different experience.
And we're having a reaction here, and I just wanted to speak to that because it's true. So Carrie is saying, you know, we aren't supposed to react strongly, but we need to help them avoid learning the wrong thing. Tough. And it is very tough. And it is also very tough as an adult not to react. I mean, of course, this is like your kid and your kid's safety that we're talking about. But the more that you can really own your own emotions and your own stress and your own anxiety, and when you do get to talk to them, try to do it as calmly as you possibly can. And nobody is perfect, and we don't need perfect, but just some sort of regulation, I think, of our own emotions can really help the teen not to get too stressed out or too reactive themselves.
And most importantly, too, not come to you anymore with stressful situations, because they have learned through their brain learning that when they come to you, it's actually more stressful for them. They already feel stressed and frazzled and hyperreactive. And then if they come to a parent and needs to have that grounding, if it becomes more stressful for them, they will learn very quickly to go sideways or underground and not come to a parent. And that's really when we see some of these behaviors that go from normal teen behaviors into the danger zone, because you're not really aware of what's going on. Yeah. And this last point in this slide kind of speaks to that, Carrie, is that during stress, our thinking becomes less flexible. This happens for adults too. We have a lot of other resources that we can lean on that help it not feel as extreme for us. But just as they are less flexible when they're stressed, we are less flexible when we're stressed. Yeah. So really knowing what we need to do to take down our stress level, calling a friend or going out on a hike or taking a few minutes by ourselves or meditating, regulating our own stress helps us be more flexible too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's really them, relying on the adults to help them regulate the emotions. So the more that you can model that, the more, again, they're going to learn from that. And I know all of this is easier said than done, of course, but, generally we want to try to do that. So let's talk a little bit about sleep. So sleep is actually one of the most important aspects of daily life, not just for teens, also for adults, really for everybody, but for teens, maybe more so because so much is happening in terms of their development, their brain development, that they really need the sleep to process everything and to give them the time that they need, their body the time it needs to do what it has to do to grow and to develop. So sleep patterns change across life cycles. So while infants and children are what we call larks, so meaning that they wake up early and go to bed early, adolescents are really owls. So that means they wake up late and they stay up until the wee hours of the morning. And a lot of that has to do with the hormonal release of melatonin. So melatonin is really the hormone that helps us to go to sleep. So it gets released. So let's say for an adult or so, around 10 o'clock, you may start feeling quite tired, but your teen is not. And that's because the melatonin really gets released about 2 hours or so after that of adults. The other thing that also plays a role here is cortisol. So cortisol and melatonin, if you will, they kind of work in opposites. So cortisol helps us to wake up in the mornings, and that's when melatonin levels sink. And then in the evenings, when it's time to go to bed, melatonin levels rise and cortisol levels decrease. So again, for your teen, all of that is a little bit delayed in that, so don't be surprised when they are nowhere near going to bed at 10 o'clock when you may be dead tired. And that's also why they stay awake until midnight or maybe even longer. So they also need 9 to 10 hours of sleep. So, which now might make sense why they're sleeping in until 10 or 11 o'clock. And so interestingly, actually, the schools really haven't done a great job at adapting to this kind of biology of the teenagers, which is why it's so difficult for them in the morning to get up and go to school early, because their melatonin is still in their bodies. So right now you actually have an opportunity, kind of a unique opportunity with coronavirus to actually be a little bit more consistent with their biology, of course within reason. We don't want adolescents teens, sleeping until 1 or 2 p.m. But, it may not be bad actually for them to, sorry, I'm multitasking here, letting people in, to actually have them sleep until 9 or 10 o'clock. And sleep, again, is very, very important for them. It's crucial to help them eat well, manage stress. And the truth of the matter is most teens don't get enough sleep. So here are all potential consequences that research has identified that's related to poor sleep. So physiologically, it has been related to bad skin, to eating too much or the wrong foods, to injuries during sport activities, rise in blood pressure and susceptibility to serious illness. And most of that is because when you don't get enough sleep, your body doesn't get the chance to recover and actually lower inflammation, and high levels of inflammation have been linked to a weakened immune system. So that makes sense then why if people don't get enough sleep, they have physiological problems as well as emotional and cognitive problems. So emotionally, aggression, impatience, impulsivity, and inappropriateness has been linked to poor sleep, low self-esteem, mood swings, and then cognitively impairment, inability to learn, inhibition of creativity, slow problem-solving abilities, and increased forgetfulness have all been linked to poor sleep. So what does that mean for you as a parent? What can you do to help your teen get the sleep that he or she needs? So first of all, the thing that tends to get in the way, let's say in normal life, is a non-corona life, is homework, because kids come home from school and they don't really want to think about their homework. They want to go on screen, they want to chat, they want to do Snapchat, or or God knows what they want to do, but they don't want to do homework. So you need to, and then 10 o'clock rolls around, 11 o'clock, and they're starting to realize that they have assignments due, and then they stay up later than they normally would, even given that delayed melatonin release. So you need to help them get homework done on time and get them to bed early. Make this part of your evening routine, ideally. So when they get home, ask them how much homework they have and help them prioritize. Again, that's what they need help with, the structure and the organization. So you want to also then check in on them throughout the night, but don't be judgmental or controlling. That's really the key here, so that they don't feel surveilled by you. Especially don't get into an argument with your teen before bedtime, because that just leads to a lot of stress, and that will make it harder for your teen to go to bed. So LED lights from electronics need to be turned off. I recommend at least 2 hours before bedtime, because all these lights definitely delay the melatonin release even more. And the same, you want to keep the room dark and cool, because also that helps with the release of melatonin. Don't put pressure on them though, because you are feeling stressed because they haven't completed an assignment, because again, stress in the evenings before bedtime is really not good for anybody, and it's not good for your teen either. Encourage them to have a bedtime routine that includes something relaxing, like a bubble bath, if you will, or or something else, or like a tea ritual, or maybe some candles. And you can even model that for them. All these tips, by the way, are good for adults too. You want to encourage them to go to bed at the same time and wake up at the same time every day within reason, and that would include the weekends too, because that regularity in sleep cycle, in sleep routine, really helps, again, these like hormonal release, the cortisol melatonin balance. Have your teen avoid caffeine after 11 a.m., and that includes things like energy drinks. Have them avoid sugar at night for sure, and have them use their bed only for sleep and not for anything else. So there's a lot of strong research backing up this idea of association. So associating the bed with nothing but sleep helps the brain, again, like make this association. It sees the bed and it thinks about sleep, and so it starts to get tired. And but when you pair that with something like watching Netflix, that's stimulating, and so that is kind of not a good association. It's not a good pairing.
Great. Those are all really good practical suggestions. And I just wanted to mention some things. Sometimes those items are not quite enough, or we can't quite get our teen to do that. And it really depends too on trying to see what else is going on. So I just wanted to talk briefly about some additional considerations when it comes to sleep. As Caroline mentioned, this is so important for our teenager. They do not get enough sleep. And not only do they need it for handling that tsunami of information they have coming in, but they really need it for memory consolidation and for effective learning and for as much mood control as they can possibly have. So it's really important to think outside the box and do a bit of a deeper dive. If your teen is having trouble sleeping, really do backwards brainstorming is what I like to call it. Not only is it just the issue of going to sleep at that time, but what else is before that that's happening that's making sleep hard? Do they get more anxiety at night? Do they have more time to think, so social stuff starts coming in? Do they ruminate about, I said this to this person and this said this to this person? Try to identify if there's anything emotional going on that's making it hard for your teen to wind down and get the rest that they need. The suggestions on the other page were really practical, good kind of lifestyle choices, but then also look at the emotional component of what else might be going on. And it says on the slide, are they not tired versus just, is there anxiety over academics, ruminating thoughts about social issues, self-doubts, depressive thoughts? These are things to definitely make sure that you cover and ask about, and just leave an open door policy that anything is okay to talk about. Nutrition, really important. Really helping regulate blood sugar throughout the day is super important. Teens, when they're skipping meals, their blood sugar is all over the place. This absolutely contributes to poor focus, motivation, mood swings. Really helping regulate blood sugar is incredibly important. They need to be getting enough protein, whether they're vegetarian or vegan or meat eaters. They need to be getting around, and you can do your own calculation based on lean body mass, but around 15 grams of protein per meal. So think about the teen who maybe skips breakfast and then just has a bag of chips at lunch, which I know so many clients that do that. And then their one meal is maybe a family dinner, or maybe even at family dinner, you're not doing a family dinner because of activities. Are they getting nutrient dense food, and are they getting enough? I can't really tell you enough how important blood sugar regulation is, and how it can really stack up towards the end of the day and increase those cortisol rates that Caroline was talking about. So then there's also journaling and something called a brain dump. A lot of times, certain teens, because I do have several teens that I work with currently that have issues with sleep, some of them, they're just not tired, and some of them, they start to really stress out at night, or worry about things they didn't do, or worry about some of those social interactions. So it's called a brain dump, just really getting everything out of their mind before they go to bed. Some teens like to journal, some teens don't. It's really hit or miss. But even if they can just write it down, things that are on their mind or things they have to follow up with the next day, that can be really helpful. And even if they want to keep something at their bedside, so if they're laying there ruminating about something, they can just write it down quickly, because you don't really want them getting on their phone and opening up their notes on their phone. Exercise earlier in the day can really help moderate sleep and can get their body more physically tired so that they're ready to really rest by the end of the day. I really love guided meditations. My kids will tell you that they're super annoyed by them and they find them creepy, but sometimes I can find one or two that they will listen to, that they like, and they're really good. There's all sorts of ones out there, some with relaxing music, some with stories. Progressive relaxation is a great example of that too, where they tighten their feet all the way up their body. These teenagers are holding a lot of emotion throughout the day. Epsom salt baths are great. Any kind of ritual, what Caroline was talking about, create a nighttime ritual, and something like a bath with magnesium and the Epsom salts can be really relaxing. And then if all else fails and you've tried all of these things, there are a lot of really great natural supplements. You can talk to a naturopath about it. You can look online. You can go to Pharmaca and see what you can find there. But melatonin, magnesium, GABA, L-theanine, and L-tryptophan are some of the ones that I have really liked. In general, I'm not saying specifically which ones your kids should use, but in general, I think that these are all worthwhile things to research and see if it might be a good fit for your teenager.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about substances, starting with alcohol. Um, so believe it or not, but teenage brains are actually better at handling the sedating effects of alcohol than adult brains are. And that is because the teenage brain has less GABA receptors in their brain. So GABA is a neurotransmitter that helps reduce anxiety levels and makes us drowsy and tired, and like all of these effects that we know that result from drinking alcohol. And the fewer GABA receptors, though, also means that your teenager actually needs to drink more in order to have these same effects. And that then will lead to higher tolerance, and that then increases the risk of addiction. So attention deficit depression, rebelliousness, anxiety, memory problems, reduction in goal-directed behaviors, and increase in aggressive behaviors have all been linked to alcohol abuse in teens. Furthermore, the development of the hippocampus is impacted and the prefrontal cortex by, too much or too frequent alcohol consumption in teens. So what does that mean for you as a parent, what you can do, some practical tips? So again, you do not want to cut off these conversations. So your teen needs to feel safe to be able to bring up these things with you, such as, hey, they had drinks at this party that I went to last weekend. So the last thing you want to do is say, you're not going to parties anymore, because they're just gonna stop talking to you. So when they talk to you about it, that's actually a great sign, because now you have a conversation going. And so with that, you want to introduce the alcohol and risks and rewards associated with drinking slowly to your teen. And again, when plenty of people drink, so obviously, it is rewarding. So it makes sense that that your teen wants to try it too. And then there's things like the peer pressure and so on. So, you don't want to shut off this conversation, and you need to acknowledge that, of course, there's good things or positive things, if you will, or pros about drinking, but then it's also on you to then discuss the cons with your teen too. And if you want to, you can even bring up some of this like brain research, and how it impacts their brain development. So again, really talking about the pros and cons of drinking so that they can make a good informed decision about alcohol. I'm sure most teens don't want to mess up their development either, or don't want to have negative consequences either, but they need you to help them remind them what those potential negative consequences could be.
Okay, marijuana. So this could be an entire presentation by itself, and we're running a little low on time, so I'm going to go over some of these points, and then also again refer to this book, The Teenage Brain. They give a lot of really good details on understanding how this brain system is affected by marijuana. I think too, we have to acknowledge that we live in Boulder, Colorado. We live in a state where marijuana is legal. And in a lot of states now, the change in the way the mindset is for marijuana used to be an illegal substance, and now that it's legal has really changed the way that teenagers are viewing the substance. I hear it all the time. Well, it's natural. Well, my parents do it, so it's fine for me. So there's this, again, we have this hyper rational thinking where they are just honing in on the piece of information that they want to be true. They can't really weigh the pros and cons as effectively. So one of the important things to really know for you is marijuana today is not the same that it was in the past. So also really educating yourself. I can't stress enough how important this is if you really want to be able to have effective conversations with your teenager about weed, which is everywhere and so easy to get. You need to understand that the marijuana today is not the same as the marijuana that you might have been exposed to when you were growing up. In the 1980s, marijuana was anywhere between 4 to 10% in potency. And now we've got average marijuana being in the 15 to 30% potency. In addition to that, we've got dabs and wax and dab pens and vapes and all these other delivery systems that are so easy to get and that are not detectable. Teens at Boulder High and Fairview will hide a dab pen in their sleeve and can smoke it during class. And it can't be traced and it can't be smelled and the teacher doesn't notice. So we have a really important issue that's going on. And by us not having those important conversations, we're really missing out on an important opportunity to educate the kids about what's going on. And that's why it is outpacing alcohol. It is really easy access. It is really easy to function high, especially if they become chronic users and are using it a few times a week, and they know how to kind of, not do too much so that they're in the corner or tripping too much. It's a lot easier to get high than it is to drink. And so that's why we do see this outpacing of weed compared to alcohol. So we know that the teenage brain is more susceptible to stress. So we know that it's overreactive and that it has this oversensitivity. And because all those reasons, there's this increase in the desire to relieve stress. So because they don't have that natural ability to calm themselves as much as an adult does, they're also going to be seeking these alternative coping skills. So again, that goes back to having conversations of what other coping skills are out there. If you find out that your teen is using alcohol or using weed, it's really important to find out, are they just using it recreationally? Are they using it when they're going to a party and socially? Or are they using it to cope with other uncomfortable feelings? That's a really important distinction. It's also important to know, and I won't go too far into this because it's very dense material, but that THC does disrupt the development of neural pathways. We know we've got this pruning and this priming and this myelination and this huge burst of growth. So the THC will actually disrupt that development and can impact long-term IQ and impact long-term intelligence. And there's several long-term longitudinal studies that have shown that. So it's really important to talk to your teen about that the amount that they smoke now can actually really impact them until their brain is more fully developed, which doesn't really happen until early to mid-20s. THC binds to endocannabinoid receptors. This, again, is a little complicated, but it's like a lock and a key. We all have an endocannabinoid system, and it gets activated, and we release these chemicals. So THC mimics that system in our brain. So when a teen is smoking weed, it gets flooded with the THC, which binds to the same receptor that an endocannabinoid would in your own system. So what happens is your brain is flooded with these feelings, and then the brain feels like relief and stress and calm and euphoria. But this is actually not the appropriate or biological lock and key. This is a fake lock and key. So then what happens is the brain is very smart. It wants to regulate that. So the brain will actually then down-regulate its own ability to produce those endocannabinoids because it's flooded with the false lock and key from the weed. So what ends up happening is a teen can get into a cycle of feeling depressed or anxious because their system has actually down-regulated itself and isn't producing those things on its own. So they need to smoke more pot to feel like themselves. And this is where the addiction cycle and the dependency cycle can really happen, the emotional dependency cycle. So early and chronic teen use has been seen to have increase in addiction rates long-term, and also issues with focus, attention, and memory. So again, there's tons of research about this. This picture on the slide shows wax and dabs. That's a real big thing that's going on right now. The second point on here is be aware of current trends, educate yourself. There's a lot going on in the weed culture that you should know about so that you can really talk to your teens intelligently about them. An average dab is about 60 to 90% potency. So we've got a huge area of risk for kids who have a dab pen or use dabs or wax regularly.
Okay, talking about electronics. So yes, electronics can be addicting. There is no question about it. I'm sure nobody would oppose that either. However, there is no turning back from the digital world today that we live in today, but we can, and in fact, we must turn away, at least at times, to get some breaks. So limiting a teen's usage of screens is not easy, but it really is necessary. So usually what happens is, the electronics are in the teen's bedroom or whatnot, and then they just get distracted with it. And again, it has this addictive quality, so it's really hard to actually put it down or put it away once they start. So you may actually want to consider moving electronics from your teen's bedroom to a common area. I realize that that's a long shot, and there's probably a lot of tears and stress and fighting would be associated with that if you don't already, you know, have that policy in place. But really, in an ideal world, that's what we would be doing. If you can't do that, at least you want to monitor the sites that they are on. And that's mostly, again, because of all the things that we talked about neurologically. They just don't have really the capabilities of knowing when sites are harmful for them. So you need to do that for them as an adult. You want to encourage your teen to make lists, such as what they need to do to get homework done, and have them cross off things to do from the list as they are achieved. And this could actually serve as a reward system. So let's say they have a bunch of homework to do. So maybe, you know, there's a list of 6 things that they need to get done. So maybe after they've done the first 2, you know, as a reward, they get a 30-minute screen time or something like that. And then they move on to the next couple things on the list. So something like that. So really using the screen time as a reward. Again, you know, mostly you want to make sure that they're actually doing the things that they need to do before they are going on their screen, and that's usually means getting homework assignments done, because again, then, you know, that perpetuates otherwise into going to bed too late, and then they don't get enough sleep and so on. So again, making them clear their bags, for instance, and organize their homework assignments, and then ask which one they need to do first. That could be an approach to make sure that they're doing their homework before they do screen time. Again, this should not look like you're policing them, but really should come from a very supportive place. And you can make this as part of your after school routine. So again, you know, as you're developing new habits, new routines, you will get resistance, but once they're getting used to it, then that's just what it is. That's just a routine. The fewer distractions, the better. So again, no TV, no screen time, and so on before these things are accomplished. And yeah. Don't just try not to approach this as a punishment, but as something that they really need help with. Okay, so I know we are really short on time, so I'm just gonna go over this pretty fast, because a lot of the things, this is really mostly a summary. So what does this all mean for you? The do's and don'ts of communication with your teen. So you want to keep your conversation short. Their attention span is very limited. Repeat your lessons, though, even though they don't want to hear it, because all of that will foster the brain connectivities that you're trying to establish, namely the right connectivities, the ones that are not destructive. Help your teen plan out the day and evening and help them think ahead. Again, they cannot do that for themselves. Take their points seriously. You have to validate them, no matter how dumb the idea might be. Hear your teen and then make your point. Always discuss pros and cons of every decision or every advice that you're giving. Treat your teen with respect, and you're more likely to get the same back from them. That also means that if they want to be treated as adults, if they want to get the freedom that adults get, you know, that also means that they have to be accountable for their actions. That means that there are consequences for their behaviors. So there's nothing wrong with it. They can't have it both ways. So they want the freedom. That also means they get the consequences. Be clear beforehand about expectations and possible consequences. So for instance, if they break the rules, they may run the risk of losing their freedom or you know, grounding or whatnot. Yeah.
Okay, and then to sum up again, some practical tips. Really understanding again that the teen's brain, the amygdala is the most active part. The limbic system is the most active part. So teens are really aware of safety in their environment. So how do you come as a parent and provide that safety? Because they might be overreactive to disappointing you, to making you mad, to getting punished. That's a real thing for a teen is the safety piece. And again, the functional MRIs, which have done so much for brain research, the little videos that show the way that the brain lights up, there were functional MRIs showing adults pictures of faces, and then the adults were able to distinguish, oh, that face looks disappointed, that face looks pensive, that face looks neutral, that face looks angry. And what they found is that when they showed those different faces to teenagers predominantly picked that the face looked angry. And I find that so interesting, Because again, it shows where we have to step in and really be that calm, kind of grounded, neutral party, because they will interpret our reaction with, again, that kind of hyper reaction, because their amygdala is more engaged than their prefrontal cortex. So mean cop versus understanding cop. You can still, as a cop, have rules and have a consequence and have a value system in your family. But if you're going to be mean about it or understanding about it, it creates a different window for your teen to have self-reflection. And I have really found this with so many clients, and truly in my own operating with my kids. If I am upset about something that happens and I come on too strong and I'm the mean cop and I try to shame their behavior or say, I can't believe you did that, what were you thinking? This is your punishment. All of a sudden their reaction goes to the punishment, instead of having their own understanding of how they got there. It's very easy for them to blame shift and just be mad at the parent, rather than having that space to be like, well, my parent was actually really fair and they were really kind in the way they talked about that. I really probably should make a different decision next time. So really think about a situation in your life where you got pulled over and a cop was really dismissive or rude or scoffed at you or rolled their eyes, versus an understanding cop that was like, yeah, I'm sorry. I know that part of the road is really tough and that stop sign's hard to see, but we've had a lot of accidents here, so I'm going to have to ticket you. So really try to think of a time in your life when you've been treated in both ways, and how when you have that understanding consequence versus the shameful consequence, there's space for you to be more reflective of your own behavior. And that's really what we're going towards. We're really not trying to control our teens' behavior. We're trying to teach them to control themselves. And if you really go with that motto and go with that premise, then these are great opportunities. So consequences versus punishment, having that mindset, being a flexible container. You can have a value system, you can have general rules, but if something happens and you need to flex and pivot because it's really important to your teen, or once they explain to you why they did that or why this one specific thing means something, be flexible, listen to them, be an organic relationship that grows and changes as it's needed. And then approach some of those conversations without an agenda. And I know that's really, really tough. But we as parents have to really be aware when we're kind of projecting our own agenda into what we think is best for our kids, and then stepping back and realizing that they are their own people and that this is part of their process. And again, that takes a lot of personal work, but it's really worth doing to keep that connection with your child. And then the last one on the slide is really asking curious and authentic questions. If you really come from the place in your heart of wanting to understand what their experience is like and what's going on for them, that will show, that energy will show through, and they will not feel like you're coming with a check mark or an agenda that you're trying to convince them into seeing it your way. So encourage teens' brains to make sense of their world and learn and encourage growth and executive functioning skills. So again, when we're asking those curious and open-ended questions, we're helping them come to their own conclusions. Remember, it's not your job to control your teen, it's your job to help them control themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the end of our PowerPoint. We pretty much went along with the book and all the chapters of the book. We really encourage you to pick up this book and read more into it. And we just wanted to leave a little time at the end for questions. You can feel free to come off mute if you'd like. If you would like to ask a question in the chat, we would love any interaction or any questions.
Mm-hmm. And here, of course, very obvious, our contact information too, if you want some private consult or anything like that, we are happy to do that too.
So I'll just go through my biggest hurdle. One of the questions, my biggest hurdle in communication with my teen, she does not like to share her feelings and problems with me, but she does have anxiety and depression. It's hard to help her when I don't know what she's going through. And this is really hard, Carrie. Of course, it's like that fine balance of giving them privacy and then also wanting to make sure that they're really okay. And it's also really fine to be transparent with your teenager, and say like, I'm torn. I want to give you privacy and I want to respect your boundaries, but I just need to know that you're okay and making safe decisions. So let them know what's going on with you too. And you can ask them, like, would you prefer to talk to a therapist about these things? You know, ask them who their support system is. If you don't feel comfortable talking to me, who do you talk to? So just really try to meet them where their need is and balance that privacy versus getting the information you need to make sure they're okay.
I think the modeling is something that can be very, very effective. So again, if you model things like routine, or, you know, talking about what's going on with you, or, you know, when you're feeling lost and so on, again, the teenage brain learns that way. So you're going through your own thought processes, even things like, I see, here's another question, my 15-year-old is not motivated to be healthy and exercise. So again, you know, you can model that. You can go on a run and just tell them, wow, I was feeling really down, but now, you know, I went on a run and and I really didn't want to, but I'm feeling a lot better now. So these kind of things can be very, very effective. And or even suggest, you know, if they're up for it, doing things together. That's another way. I do actually have a client who just told me that she's now doing a lot of the like healthy eating and exercising and getting a routine in with eating and exercising together with her mom, and she's been loving it. She's been absolutely loving it and been doing really well with it, both of them.
And then we have a question about, my 15-year-old is not motivated to be healthy. Exercise suggestions. Caroline, you were just saying, like, model that behavior.
Yeah.
Another thing I would add to that is really, again, going back to executive functioning skills, is help them understand why it's valuable to them. Mm-hmm. Because sometimes they might just be resisting the behavior, but what will they get out of it?
Right.
You know, do they want to be more fit? Are they doing a race for something? Or maybe having them train for something, since they're so reward based. Again, rewards are going to work way better than punishment with this age. Right. So try to get underneath to how to create a connection for them to why they want to value exercising. There's another question too. My boys sneak their computers. What do you think about locking them up? Caroline, do you have a reaction to that?
Oh, I don't even see that. Where is that?
It was a private question to me.
Oh, okay. Can you repeat that?
My boys sneak their computers. What do you think about locking them up?
Yeah, I mean, what do they do when they sneak the computers? I guess if they are on the screen for hours and hours at a time, then yeah, you want to put a limit on that for sure. And again, you know, you may want to explain to, or you definitely want to explain to them why. And it's not as much as a punishment as it is, again, to support them, because they need these kind of limits. And so if you can tie it up in some sort of reward, I think, you know, if they get their homework done or something, then they can have an hour or so of time with their computers. That, you know, then they're also learning then how to work for things, actually.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I definitely think setting limits is really great. As much as you can do it in a collaborative conversation, like, hey, I noticed the use has been too high. This is what I think the use should be. What do you think the use should be? Okay, we're going to have to set some limits. What time of day do you want it? You know, if you can set limits and make it collaborative and give them choices that are okay to you, but let them feel like they have input and some participation in that, it's going to make it easier too. I definitely think taking the computers, but letting them know ahead of time that that's going to be happening, so that they don't feel triggered into that fight-flight response with that overreactive limbic system.
And why you're doing it, right?
Yes.
Not to punish them, but there
Context.
would be good reasons for it, I would assume. You know, I mean, you're probably, the person who asked the question probably is observing the negative consequences of it, such as them getting to bed way too late because they're on the computer for so long, or them not getting homework done because they're on the computer for so long. And so you want to, open up that conversation, I think.
Great. And then there was one other question about homeschooling with ADHD and EFD. And I think we covered some of the learning stuff, you know, especially in a couple of the slides that Caroline did, is really helping them plan their time. I know I do that a lot with my 13-year-old. You know, I make sure that I'm not working from 12 to 1. I set aside a time. He knows I'm available during that time. And we go through what did you do today? What's your homework for tonight? What are your blocks going to be? What are your time blocks going to be? He's going to relax for 20 minutes. He's going to work for 45. And I give him suggestions, but I have him kind of lead it. And then I help that along because they really need some help thinking that through. So routine is really, really important with that, and collaborating with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the collaboration is really very important, and that also goes back to these points. Trying to treat them with respect, just like you want them to treat you. Also, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Yeah, because again, the more I think it goes also back to modeling. The more that you can model that kind of respectful behavior, I mean, it's like you would never tell another adult, to just do it without any explanation or consideration of their point of view. And so don't do that to your teen either.
Be a safe place for them to come to, and really create that safety as early as you can, that you can handle whatever they're bringing to you. You're not going to overreact, and you won't be perfect at it. So when you do overreact, or when you do have a response that's less than ideal, just make sure to repair it. Just go back and say, I'm sorry, I was really stressed about this thing that was going on with work. Let's do that over. Let me retry that. And that's one reason too, with this homeschooling, I decided that I'm not working from 12 to 1 because I was not in an emotional state to problem solve with my kid when I was running in between clients. So know your own triggers. That's one of the biggest things that I think we can both really say, is that really know what triggers you, when can you regulate yourself, how can you regulate yourself, so you can really show up in the best way to support your children.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's another great way of modeling, I think. If you can admit yourself when you're overwhelmed, when you're stressed. The other thing about adolescents, they can feel very much shamed very easily. And so I think you admitting, I'm not perfect either, and I'm making mistakes too, and I get stressed out too, it shows them that that's okay too, because they actually feel a lot of shame and guilt over how they are behaving, because they cannot control their own behaviors either. They don't want to be hysterical, screaming people either, right? Nobody wants to be that. And so I think, again, modeling this, the imperfection, if you will.
Yes.
I think can be very valuable lessons.
And really repairing too. I mean, really repairing that. Remember, they have this overreactive system, and you don't want those feelings to get stuck in there. So if you have a bad interaction or it goes sideways, just make sure to go up after and own your part, take ownership, apologize for your part, and just connect. Connection is so important at this age. Rules without relationship equal rebellion. And I love that it's in one of the books, and it's so true. So relationship. Make sure to keep the attachment during this stressful time, so that you can be that safe landing spot for your teen, and they can come to you, and then you can be their prefrontal cortex with them.
Yeah. You're going to be surprised how you're going to start seeing that they're going to talk back to you just like you're talking to them if you do it enough, because that's the learning. That's the beauty of how they're learning.
So are there any other questions? We're at our time, and we love this topic. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nora.
Yeah, thank you. And Linda too.
Thanks, Linda.
Thank you. And again, don't hesitate to reach out. You have our contact information right here, of course, also on the BPS website. So if you have any other questions, if anything comes up tomorrow or the next day or whenever, just, shoot us an email, give us a call, whatever works, and we'll be happy to get back to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Linda.
Yeah, thank you very much for the positive feedback.
Oh, and we are taping that. We are recording this to Siska. So we are recording this. I'm not sure where it's going. Do you know, Caroline? Is it going on the BPS website?
Yeah, probably. I might also actually put it on my website if I can. So okay. I don't know if you're doing the same, but yeah, it will be through BPS, I believe.
Okay. So this is recorded, so we'll probably shorten it up a little bit, fix it up, and then it will be posted on BPS and Caroline's website. Maybe my website, we'll see. But Also, please download the book list. The books on this sheet are so great. And I really, if you're having trouble with just knowing where to separate yourself from your child, The Conscious Parent is extremely good for that. It was very helpful for me.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you, Dana.
Yeah, and the book itself, of course, is really, I think, pretty easy to read, I think, and it gives some really good practical tips too. So if you haven't already, probably something good.
And the book list, someone was just asking me, where is the book list? If you scroll up in the chat, you will see it as an icon in the chat, right, Caroline? And they just say push to download. Maybe you can add it again too.
Yeah, probably, if I can figure it out. But yeah, it is. It should be the first thing in the chat. So
okay. And Elizabeth, if you need help finding it, you can just email me separately and I'll send it to you.
I think I got it here again. Where is it? Here we go. Okay, I just posted it again. So for anybody who hasn't seen it, up on top, here it is again in the chat room.
Perfect.
Okay.
I revisit all these books all the time for work and for my personal life. So they're all really great.
Right.
Thank you so much for attending, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna exit out here then.
Okay, me too.
Okay.